Welcome, Chris. It's good to have you back. We've had a couple of sessions, Chalk and Talk webinar sessions on the Komprise solution of data management. And I wanted to record this follow-up session with you because I think this would be a valuable resource for people to refer to on a regular basis, where you will actually show us how the Komprise software platform works and how it addresses some of the issues. Maybe you could just give a really quick recap of the high-level points from our sessions, and then show us how the Komprise platform addresses them, and we'll take it from there.
Great, thanks, Lee. So in the previous couple of sessions, we talked about the initial problem of storage growing and outgrowing the budget to manage and to keep expanding that storage. And it's growing at really quite a rate. We're seeing 42% year on year. So that's, you're looking at your data doubling every couple of years or so. And we do that because we're creating more data, we're deleting less of it. How can you manage this without just always buying brand new storage? How can you break out of that cycle? And we spoke a bit about how you need to analyze that data. And once you've analyzed it, then you can make some decisions about, where to best place that data. And if you can actually make those decisions actionable and then move the data according to a policy, then you do have a way of saving that data.
That's great, Chris. So can you show us a little bit how that actually works in real time?
Absolutely. I'll take you through the offering, through the platform. And how we do what we do, and a little bit about why we do it as well. So I'm actually going to start a little bit behind the scenes as to what do you actually need to deploy Komprise. The screen you're looking at the moment is our director, and this is the control plane. This is where all of the information is surfaced, but it's purely just the control plane that sits in the cloud. What you're going to need to do is to deploy some virtual machines, some appliances, which are going to sit close to your storage in your data center, and they do all the hard work, and we call those the observers. They're very straightforward to deploy from a virtual appliance file. Just download it, put it into your hypervisor of choice, and then give it some networking information. They'll connect to the director and essentially carry out any of the instructions that we issue from the interface. Once we've got those set up, we need to add our source storage. And Komprise can talk to pretty much anything that is serving out SMB or NFS. So anything that you can be putting files on. Out of the box, we are set up to talk to most of the common platforms that you might see, whether that's various types of Windows Server or some of the more dedicated file servers, file platforms like NetApp or Dell EMC Isilon. Once we've added that storage in, we discover and look for the shares that we're interested in. Once we've chosen the shares that we'd like to look at, we will enable those. Once that share's been enabled, it's going to send a message to the observer, and the observer is going to start to crawl that file share. So it's going to work its way through all of the files and the directories, and we're going to be looking specifically for that file system metadata. So we don't need to open the files up. We're just looking to find out what the file system knows about them. How big is the file? Who owns it? Most importantly, when was it last accessed? And we're going to collect that data together, and we're going to aggregate it and summarize it at a share level. And that's going to give us this picture of how hot or indeed cold is our data. And we represent that in the plan screen.
So this actually will work with your on-prem and your cloud data stores.
Yes, if it's accessible. We do have a platform which is designed specifically to look at object storage, and that does a very similar thing where the observer is going to crawl through the object storage bucket and look at the metadata around the objects contained in it. So once we've collected all that data together, we're going to summarize it on this screen here. And we summarize it in the graph that we refer to internally as the data donut. And this really shows us how hot the percentage volume of data across the entire estate, across all of those enabled shares from different platforms, how much of it is hot and how much of it is cold. Our standard setup is that anything that is blue hasn't been touched for a year or more. Now you can see in this particular little demo environment that just over half of my data hasn't been touched for over a year. And that's quite conservative compared to what we would see in the field, where frequently 60–70% of data hasn't been touched in a year or more. And if it's not being used, then perhaps there's somewhere better that you can put it. Taking a little bit more into the analysis and going just that little bit deeper, we can start to break down some of that data by the other bits of metadata that we've collected. So we can look at the breakdown of files by type. Have we got files that perhaps are in the wrong place? Have you got backups being kept in team drives? Have you got database files being kept in personal drives? The wrong type of data in the wrong place can be a very expensive way. If you're storing data that really should be sitting in tier 2 on tier 1 storage, then that's very expensive, because not only have you got to provide a capacity for it, but you've got to be able to replicate and back that data up. So a small amount of data at the front end can actually require a fairly significant investment throughout the storage cycle.
Yeah, like one of the topics that you'd mentioned in your earlier sessions about rot data, redundant, obsolete, trivial, and how we end up having to buy storage at today's prices to store data that we may use years from now, or maybe we used it years ago. And this is a really great way to get some insight on that.
Absolutely, Lee. It's a great way to start to uncover where that rot data is sitting. Another great example of the obsolete data is data from people who are no longer with the company. Looking at the space by the top owners can really highlight that very quickly. It's very common in academic circles, where you might well have data that belongs to students who graduated 5 years ago. That data is probably not really the sort of data you want sitting on your tier 1 storage. So we can identify that very quickly.
Yeah, this is a really great overview.
So taking some of this data, we can start to build up a little bit of a plan about what we want to do with it. And in Komprise, our data management plan consists of a number of groups. And within each group is going to be one or more file shares that will have the same policy applied to them. So in that policy, we can do 3 things. We can move data. So we'll move it to a target. So the target is going to be another file platform or an object platform that could be on-prem, could be in the cloud. And when we move that file to that target, we're going to replace it with a dynamic link. So as far as the end user is concerned, the file appears to be still there. There's still a file with that name and that icon. But when they open it, or if they do decide to open it, bearing in mind, it's not going to be moved unless it was over a year old. But if someone does decide to double click on that file, it will open, and it will open seamlessly without having to deploy any agents. So the data is still there. It's still able to be used. It's just not being used at the moment. So we're putting it somewhere cheaper.
So yeah, I think actually you just answered my next question. So there indeed no agents are needed for this. This is actually something that works in the background?
That's right. Because we use sort of file system native constructs, so there's nothing proprietary. We're using symbolic links. We use some specific features of some of our partner file systems, like the NetApp, to do this, so that an end user, on their desktop or from their VDI session, they need to open up a file, or maybe even an application needs to access a file. Look at medical systems, pathology systems that create huge volumes of data, terabytes a day, and that can just be for a small hospital. And that data is extremely important for a relatively short period of time, and it needs to be accessed very quickly for that time. But ultimately, you can't you can't afford to have the capacity of the performance tier to store everything. So you need to find a way of being able to move that data somewhere a little bit cheaper after a period of time, but still be able to access it. When a doctor needs to get to that data, he's going to find the patient's records, and he's going to want to open that scan that he did last year. He's not going to want to wait for someone to go and get the data back from a tape, or even as I saw in one particular customer environment, for someone to go and switch the archiving server back on, which is the ultimate offline way of keeping your data.
Yeah, no, that's really great. And I think we can't understate enough the importance of, like what we were saying earlier about no agents, no proprietary. So also, if a customer stops using Komprise, they still have access to their data just the same.
Absolutely. And it's not just moving the data that we can do with Komprise. We can actually take the decision that, this data is so old that ultimately we just want to get rid of it. It's already been backed up. It's probably sitting maybe on some year-end tapes that are happily in a tape vault somewhere. We can actually mark the data for deletion. Now, Komprise is not, it's very, very risk-averse company when it comes to data loss. So we don't actually delete any data, but what we do is we will move it into a hidden folder. So as far as the end user is concerned, that data is gone. The storage admin would then go in and clear and purge that trash folder eventually, once they're satisfied that the data really isn't needed. And that's what we call our confine policy. So again, we could set the policy to confine data that might be, in this case, over 3 years old. So that last section of data, that's the data we just want to delete. We don't need it. Yeah. And as we play around with these policies, the purple section inside the donut will change, and that will reflect how much data we could be moving to the target. And as well as that moving, we like to help our customers build up the business case, because doing this ultimately is to save some money, because you either don't have the budget, or you'd like to spend some of the budget that perhaps previously would have been on the automatic storage refreshes on something more interesting, something that's actually going to bring a greater business value than just providing file storage. Yeah. And we do that with our cost model.
So if just a question also, if I have some of this data, especially the archive data in the public cloud, how does this work with things like egress charges? It's notoriously expensive to read back data, or, to download it out of the cloud. How do you access that?
Absolutely. So when you're pulling data back, egress is always going to be a consideration. That's why we want to be careful with the amount of data that we put into the cloud. Putting too much data into a cloud platform can actually cause maybe not as many problems, but it can cause the same sort of level of problems as you might have by putting not enough and having to expand your on-prem storage, because you can get these surprise bills because you've suddenly archived too much data and your users are now trying to pull it all back, and your cloud provider is out buying themselves a brand new car, because there can be a big shock. So we model, and we know, generally speaking, once data's gone to archive from a certain age, how much of that's going to be recalled. And it's surprisingly little. We're looking at sort of single digits of percentage of data that goes off will never come back. Yeah. And we know approximately what the cost is, and all of these fields are designed to be filled in by our customers and partners, so that this is running with their data. In fact, with our cloud platform, we pull this data in dynamically, simply because the cloud providers have a costing API that, they're very transparent about their costs. I've yet to find an API for a data center storage provider that's quite so transparent. But when you're faced with the upgrade quote, to buy another couple of shelves of your preferred file storage, then you suddenly get you become very acutely aware of how much your storage is costing you per terabyte per year.
That's right. Yeah, the sticker shock, right? Yeah,
absolutely. And whilst a storage vendor is not going to suddenly give you money back because you're using slightly less of the storage that you've already paid for, it's around that cost avoidance of maybe you don't have to expand it every 18 months and buy 3 years worth of storage at today's prices, when you know that storage is going to be dropping over time.
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. This is great.
So as well as once you've got all this set up, you would activate your plan, and every 7 days Komprise is going to run the policies. And that's just a default figure. You can make it more or less frequent if you like. But remember, we're dealing with cold data. This data is not really going anywhere. So it doesn't matter if it takes us a little bit of time to move it.
Yeah, of course, it's been there 3 years in this case. So.
Absolutely. And this archiving type operation, this isn't a once only thing. This is not just a spring clean and forget about it. Mm-hmm. It's a continual thing. So every week you're going to have data that's going to age out. Once that data's aged out, we'll move it down to that tier. So once it's set up, it's pretty set and forget.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, this is really a big challenge for most companies I've ever come in contact with or worked with, not only just managing the amount of data, but the kind, like you say, the kind of data that's in there, the complexity, but also, those, I think you mentioned P90X videos and stuff like that, that's hiding in there. So this is really a great overview.
Absolutely. So, talking about sort of the life cycle of a file server. Now, a file server, it's born, it gets provisioned, or maybe it gets purchased if it's physical hardware, and it's day one, it's really happy. It's got loads of capacity, loads of performance. It's really up to date, and it gets filled up. And because it's brand new, people just use it as a ground to put anything on. There's some temporary swing space needed for a project. They're going to throw it into that server. And over time, the server gets full and it starts to slow down a little bit. And maybe its support contract starts to come towards the end of its life. And you decided that you want to free up some capacity. So you move the cold data from that server to another tier of storage. Now, that server reaches the end of its life. What do you want to do? With a lot of platforms, and with even if that was sort of had some native tiering, there's plenty of storage providers that will automatically expand their cold data into the cloud. Problem is when you want to buy a new one, because how do you just move the hot data without having to pull the cold data back? And that's something that Komprise is extremely good at. We've got our own migration engine built in. And what this engine does is it will share by share allow us to move data between our old source and a new destination. So we buy ourselves a brand new server, and it's just going to move that hot data. And once we've moved all the hot data, we will update the symbolic links that we've created to point to the target. So we do it without having to rehydrate any of the cold data, which means that the migration is done quicker. It's under more control. We use an iterative technique, which allows us to start the migration way before the planned cutover time. So one of the big traditional problems with migrations is that you have a necessary window to do that cutover in, and there's this big rush to try and get everything done within that window. Whereas with Komprise, we can start the migration weeks before, and we get down to the stage where actually we know we're only copying 1 day's worth of data. And once we get to that stage, we know exactly how long our cutover is going to take, because it's just that iteration of these are the files that have changed or were open during the last 24 hours. And that's just what we're going to be copying. Yeah. So it gives us a lot of control and the ability to reduce the potential outage windows caused by a migration, because they can be pretty significant.
Yeah, it's serving as an abstraction layer then that's independent from the physical location. So that gives a lot of flexibility here then, it looks like.
Yeah, it just gives us a lot of the migration techniques can be done with a lot of scripting and what I would refer to as sort of the Excel sheet of pain, trying to manage this migration of how far did we get the last time, or this migration step got 99% of the way through, then the network crashed, so we've got to start again from scratch. And that's quite an unpleasant thing to do. Whereas managing it with Komprise, it's all part of the platform. This is an included feature in the product. You're not having to buy extra modules to be able to do it. So, we think it really adds a lot of value.
Yeah.
And helps complete that life cycle of, whether you're consolidating multiple servers. I'm working with a customer at the moment who's been, they've got maybe 10, 15 Windows file servers that are attached to a SAN that is probably about old enough to vote. And they need, they need to get the data off there, and they want to consolidate that down maybe to one file server.
Yeah.
And they're going to use Komprise to move the data off first, and that the little data that's left that's actually active and hot, we can move that straight away into a brand new server.
Yeah, fantastic.
The last thing I wanted to touch on the demo, and you mentioned it earlier, and this was something we spoke about on the very first Chalk Talk, was around deep analytics. Yeah. And really seeing what makes up that rot data. The data donut graphs that we went into earlier, they're great for seeing the high level picture, and you can really see what the general feeling across your environment is, with a little bit of specifics on the details.
Yeah.
But if you actually want to see, well, what files are making up the data that we need to move out, this is where deep analytics comes in. So instead of just sort of crawling and summarizing data, it builds up an index, and you end up with this, essentially a data lake of all of your file system metadata. And we can query that. We can query it pretty much like you'd be choosing something off of Amazon, by all of the various different types of metadata that we collect. You can build up queries and see them in these results, and actually see the contents of the file. See the contents of the metadata. Yeah. We're not seeing into the file. This is just what we know about it. Here's its actual path. This is exactly what the file name was, how big it was, who owned it. And we can extract this out as CSVs, either for use in reporting. And perhaps in the future, we'll be able to use some of these complex queries to feed back into that data management plan, so that to be able to have, rather than just selecting things at a share level and maybe with some slight fine tuning, to be able to have an extremely granular data management plan, saying, actually, all of my engineering drawings I want to put somewhere. I want to treat my drawings different to how I want to treat the rest of my data. In fact, if it's not an engineering drawing and it's over 7 years old, get rid of it. If it's an engineering drawing, then we want to keep it.
I can see on the left here, you have even a place to put custom file extensions. So if there's a very specific non-standard type of file that's specific to your company, you can actually report on those as well.
That's right. We also have the ability to add tags into the index, so that we're not modifying any of the source data, but we can add additional metadata into the index and into the information we know about a file. And those tags are a key value pair. So you could, for example, have a tag. Imagine if you're an engineering company that builds projects around the world. So you might well have a tag with the location, or a tag with the type of project. To say it was a bridge in Dubai. And you query for everything that was in that original project folder, and you tag it bridge, location, Dubai, project type bridge. And that means that someone can come along at another date and go, I need to find all the drawings that relate to bridges.
Yeah.
And any other project that will do that, they'll be able to bring up a list of, these are all of our drawings that we've ever done in the last 10 years that relate to bridges. And that in itself is taking something which is very much at a data center kind of infrastructure level and elevating that up into something which is adding value to the business itself.
Yeah. So can you actually set the tags from here?
You can. So you can set the tags based on the query.
Okay.
So if I was to look for a certain query of files in certain places with maybe a certain name type of a certain extension, build that query up, and then I run that through the tagging engine, say, yep, anything that comes out of that query, we need to tag.
Great. Yeah.
There's also an API available. So we can start to look to do this perhaps in a more programmatic fashion to be able to do that tagging.
Oh yeah, that'll be really big for a lot of companies. So that's great.
Absolutely. I think it opens up a number of options. Imagine now there are one of the tools I spoke about in the first section is analytics tools that look inside the files. Now it's not something that Komprise aims to do, but there are tools that do that, and maybe they can tag files that are sensitive. Yeah. And if you could actually take an output from a tool like that and then use it to update our index data, then that's extremely powerful, because then you might be able to look for sensitive data and potentially treat sensitive data differently.
Yeah, that's great.
So it's a really, really powerful part of the product. It's quite understated at the moment, but it's certainly somewhere to look for where we're moving forward in the future.
Yeah, especially here in Europe, where I'm based, we have GDPR. Of course, that affects everybody. So I imagine there's a whole lot of applications related to that as well. So this has been really great, Chris. It's good to actually see it. We watch lots of webinars. I've heard all kinds of presentations and things like that, but every now and then I just really want to see what we're talking about. And strangely enough, I have a very heavily populated NAS at home with all kinds of garbage. And I'm almost thinking, is there a consumer license for this sort of thing? So that'll help me get my life sorted.
Yeah, I think there's definitely scope to help people clear up all their junk.
Absolutely. Very well. Great. Thanks. And look forward to doing more of these types of sessions with you, Chris. So thanks for taking the time and showing us what Komprise can do for us.
No problem. Thanks, Lee, and take care.